This morning, like every other, I opened my eyes a few minutes before the alarm went off. According to the curator, that's a sign of developing self-discipline. That's fine, of course, but the same recurring dream still makes me lie in silence, staring at the ceiling and holding back uninvited tears. At least until the computer plays its cheerful tune, signaling it's time to get up. A shower and an energy bar gradually washed away the remnants of sleep and helped me forget the night's visions. Another day of monotony had begun. I tossed the wrapper into the recycler, pulled on my light gray uniform, and stepped out into the empty hallway. First on the schedule was the morning run. It probably looked odd from the outside. A 12-year-old boy with a heavy backpack puffing determinedly along a winding path through the trees, leaping over roots, dodging branches, and glancing constantly at his watch. The curator's praise. You if you run faster than the day before. If not, they frown and jot something down in a paper notebook. It didn't take me long to figure out it was more for psychological effect than actual record keeping. Who uses paper these days when you can just dictate notes into a comm unit? Still, every time I see that notebook open, I get uneasy. The trail ended at the obstacle course. I had to pull myself up a ladder, hop across buried posts, and finally cross a water-filled pit on a narrow beam 5 meters high. It's a toss-up. You either train your balance or your swimming skills, depending on whether you fall. I got lucky today, crossed all 10 meters without slipping. With a quick glance at my watch, I jogged off toward the showers. Someone from the maintenance crew had already laid out a fresh uniform. Just put it on and off to breakfast. Not that breakfast at the base was much to get excited about. It was usually some horrifying mix of highly nutritious but absolutely flavorless compounds, with vitamin granules and some vaguely convincing flavor additives. Today's was allegedly red lemon. At least that's what the woman at the counter told me. Poking at the strange-smelling gray mush with my spoon, I realized I still didn't know her name after 2 years. Never the time or the energy for small talk. At other tables sat kids like me, eating the same stuff. There was no strict ban on talking, but the curator kept dropping hints that the less we interacted, the better. Planetary news started playing on the screen mounted over the food counter. I watched the pretty anchorwoman deliver tragic reports about our fleet's losses near some nameless asteroid. By the end of the segment, though, she brightened and proudly announced that the treacherous enemy's losses were comparable to, and even greater than, our own. I snorted and returned to my unappetizing sludge. The curator had spent the past 2 years training me to watch the news carefully, separating facts from fluff, and the facts were grim. After the first strike on Corona 2, we lost around 90% of our shipyards. Sure, they've been rushing to build new ones on the capital planet ever since. But the war is essentially lost. Access to resources is limited. Corona 1 is a planet with a beautiful, mild climate, practically a resort, and rich in agricultural produce. But it has almost no heavy metal deposits necessary for shipbuilding. They're trying to ramp up production from the little they have. But as the curator puts it, you can't feed 100 starving people with just a few crumbs of bread. The enemy, after making the first move, didn't rush. They retreated to their planet, the third, in the system, and waited for our main fleet, led by an admiral blinded by rage. Then, supported by their orbital fortresses, they won the decisive battle. With heavy losses, yes, but they won. For a while, a forced peace settled over the star system. It's hard to fight when there's nothing left to fight with. Unfortunately for us, the enemy still had more ships. Their shipyards were untouched. So, a year later, hostilities resumed, with a huge advantage on the side of the Threes. Our battered fleet suffered more defeats and was pushed back. We lost Corona 2 for good. The enemy even reached the capital planet, but this time we pushed them back, thanks to the orbital stations. Now, it's limited to small skirmishes in space. Both sides lose ships, but nothing decisive happens. The enemy can afford this. Their shipyards are operating at full capacity, churning out several mid-sized ships every month. Ours, by comparison, are practically useless. As the curator says, we don't stand a chance. Not in the long run. The only thing keeping us in the fight is the fact that the enemy hasn't yet gathered the strength to break through our orbital defenses that were technically still at war, but in reality, it's just the death throes of a defeated state hiding behind its orbital bases, which won't last forever either. Classes began right after breakfast. A standard school curriculum, the history of the Federation and the Corona system, math, languages, both the federal standard and our local dialect, just like in any regular school, except the focus is a bit specialized. Chemistry leans heavily toward explosives and poisons. Physical education is almost entirely hand-to-hand combat. It's that kind of institution that today's main lessons were in history. Galactic history was covered in broad strokes, as usual, but internal system history was taught in depth from both our side and that of Corona 3. I don't quite get the point yet, but I memorize it diligently. The curator once made it very clear, the better I study, the better my chances of living a long and happy life. After class, I went straight to his office. Our usual chess game, mixed, with talk about the future and the present. A bit of rest, a bit of mental exercise that I knocked on the standard light gray door, same color as my uniform. Come in. Your coffee's getting cold, came the voice from inside. I pushed the handle and entered. The curator's office was the complete opposite of everything else on the base. Soft, inviting furniture, landscapes on the walls, a plush carpet, dim lighting. Today, the room also smelled of freshly brewed coffee. Curator. Chris. The official exchange of greetings, after which we could relax. I sank into a leather chair and took a sip of the hot drink. Coffee, which had somehow made its way here from Earth ages ago and taken root beautifully, now held a place of honor in the planetary export lineup. Lately, of course, our exports were zero, but still. What did you study today? The curator asked neutrally, setting up the chessboard. History. Nothing special. Early conflicts between the colony administrations. Well, not nothing. Exactly. He scratched his crown of graying stubble. That's where all of this started, you know. Who do you think was to blame? He paused and carefully moved a pawn forward. They were all at fault, I replied, quickly moving my piece. The threes tried to turn this planet into their vacation spot. We tried to turn them into our factory floor, and Corona 2, which could have been the mediator, quickly bowed to us instead. That sealed the split in the system. So why did they choose sides so quickly? The alliance between a mining and construction world and one that's agricultural and recreational is much more promising than with another mining planet, I said. And besides, Corona 2 is much closer to the first planet than to the third. The curator repeated, still studying the chessboard. Anything else interesting happened today? I looked at the board too. The game had only just begun, but already there were vague hints of something stirring. Some kind of preparation on the checkered field, but I couldn't quite make out what. I watched the planetary news. We crushed the enemy again and lost a few more ships in the process. The curator gave a humorless snort, sipped his coffee, and said nothing. When do you think they'll attack the planet? My companion sighed, gently set his cup on the table, leaned back in his chair, and closed his eyes for a moment. Not for a while, Chris, not yet. I think we still have a few years. First, they'll have to completely wipe out our fleet. Then, they'll need to build up enough ships to break through our planetary defenses. That's no easy task, and I'm sure they're facing serious logistical issues. They're running themselves into the ground, no doubt. And after that, you really think it won't be like last time? There's no reason for it to be. They don't want ruins, they want our infrastructure. The plantations, the farms, the cities. Trust me, after they destroy our orbitals, they'll strike the surface only with pinpoint attacks. He leaned toward the board again, moved his bishop 2 squares forward, luring me with the illusion of a vulnerable right flank. I didn't take the bait. You've never really told me what I'm supposed to do when that time comes. In fact, you've told me almost nothing at all. Well, today's your lucky day, the curator said, giving me a sly look. Time for a little celebration, too. A celebration? I asked, puzzled, tearing my eyes away from the board. It's been 2 years since the start of our program. The brass just finished their first evaluation, and I'd already forgotten about the game entirely. And you've been selected for the advanced training group. I'm proud of you. He beamed at me with a broad, fatherly smile. The bastard. If I hadn't brought up the topic, he probably wouldn't have even mentioned it. How many of us got in? I tried to keep my voice steady. Clearly, changes were coming. That's classified, but you'll find out soon enough. How was the selection made? He shrugged his thin shoulders. Overall performance, psychological profile, discipline, physical stats, intelligence, and intuition scores. I don't know the exact details. I wasn't involved in the selection. So what happens now? Nothing to worry about. We'll move to a different base. The training will continue. Most likely, there'll be new disciplines. Don't lose focus now, your move. I lost the chess game miserably. My head just wasn't in it. 2 years. I'd been here that long. Almost since the day the skies fell on Corona 2. And now it seemed that chapter of my life was over. As I left the curator's office, memories of the evacuation returned. Smoke, hanging like a trembling curtain on the horizon. Sudden gusts of searing wind. The stinging smell of burning choking. My lungs. Faint flashes high in the sky. And in the middle of it all, a group of terrified teenagers clinging to two equally frightened teachers. Fire creeping slowly toward us. And the roar of a landing drop shuttle nearby. That we stood there, staring at the scorched and blistered hull of the machine, not knowing what to do, relying on our teachers. Mr. Tyler and Ms. Akato, I remember it. Clearly, frozen in place, staring at the opening hatch in fear. But nothing bad happened. A soldier in Commonwealth uniform leaned out, scanned the area, then shouted for us to get inside, waving us over. And we ran away from the burning forest, the smoke, and the scalding wind. Ran off that planet. When our shuttle lifted off, some little girl asked whether we'd be going back for her mother. No one answered. Ms. Akato simply wrapped the girl in her arms and gently stroked her head, rocking her like a newborn. That I didn't ask anything. Why would I? I'd seen it all. The cafeteria doors appeared before me, cutting short my thoughts. I was starving, as usual. The curator's coffee had delayed it for a bit, but now the hunger was back with a vengeance. Unfortunately, lunch meant etiquette class. Fortunately, lunch meant delicacies, with instructions on how to properly eat them. Today, according to the display screen, we'd be sampling blue mussels. Once again, I couldn't help thinking that the first colonists hadn't bothered much with naming things, just labeling the local flora and fauna after their Earth equivalents. I doubted Earth mussels were half a meter long or spat venomous spines. Blue mussels are one of the most popular delicacies on Corona 1, began the smiling girl on the screen. They can be consumed raw, baked, or boiled. When eating them raw, be sure to first drizzle. I carefully followed the instructions, starting with the raw mussel, then the baked one, and finally the boiled. I like the baked one best. Who knows? Maybe that little detail will come in handy one day. The rest of the day was spent doing homework, and in the evening, I went out for another run. Running at dusk was tougher. Branches suddenly appeared right in front of me, and the roots seemed noticeably bigger and more tangled. But I managed to cover the distance. I slipped up on the parallel bars, though, fell down, splashing water everywhere and hitting my side on the surface. Then I had to fight with my backpack, which stubbornly tried to drag me underwater. I crawled ashore, wet, dirty, and pissed off. Luckily, as usual, there were no direct spectators around, except for a few cameras monitoring my progress. Then came a surprise. My watch beeped and displayed a message ordering me to be at the landing pad in 10 minutes. I barely managed to rinse off in the shower and change clothes, though I had to sprint to the destination afterward. Showing up? Eagle, my curator, strolling around the pad, gave me a skeptical look and turned away. I, trying to catch my breath after the sprint, tried to recall what an eagle was. Some kind of earth animal, I think. The pad, brightly lit by landing lights, was quite crowded. After catching my breath, I counted 16 others besides us. Judging by their age, 8 other students like me with their curators. Their faces were vaguely familiar, but nothing more. Curator? I called quietly. What's going on? He stopped next to me and looked up at the sky. Nothing special, Chris. I told you earlier today you passed to the next level. So today, you and these guys, he gestured toward the others, are heading to the new base. That's soon, I blurted. The curator suddenly ruffled my hair, messing up my hairstyle. Don't be scared. It'll be more interesting there, you'll see. The flyer appeared suddenly. The surrounding darkness around the base spat out a silent black silhouette, which then made a sharp turn and softly landed right in the center of the pad, immediately deploying 2 ramps. A special ops vehicle with a virtuoso pilot. I was impressed. Run. The curator shouted, leading the way. Inside, the flyer was all about functionality and comfort. Anti-G seats, tactical screens showing side views, weapon racks, empty for now. I noticed the rough ribbed floor. Then the curator shoved me into a seat, strapped me in, pulled the helmet over my head, then sat next to me. The special forces guy standing in the cabin nodded approvingly and stared at the others. About 20 seconds later, he nodded again, slammed a big red button on the partition between the pilot's cabin and passenger area, then dropped into the nearest free seat. The ramps quickly retracted inside. Doors closed, cutting us off from the outside world, and a gentle jolt announced that the flyer was airborne at a couple of minutes accelerating, and we reached cruising altitude. Curator, how far are we flying? Classified, he answered. Then, thinking it over, reluctantly added, I don't know myself. The flight lasted about half an hour. I never figured out our speed or exact destination. But where we ended up, it was still daytime. The flyer's speed was incredible. I jumped out with the others, and it immediately took off again, disappearing into the clouds. We were left to take in the surroundings. There was plenty to see. The new base was nestled in a wide mountain valley, surrounded by majestic cliffs glowing orange on their snowy caps in the setting sun. But the valley itself was warm. Cheerful green grass stretched everywhere, and a small river ran in the distance, ending in a little lake. I wondered if it was natural or artificial. On the lake's shores grazed some animals. Looked like ordinary earth sheep to me. Nearby stood several squat, rectangular, light yellow buildings. One bore the emblem of a radio-electronic station that a man in camouflage was approaching us briskly. I think this is our destination, my curator remarked, heading toward him. I followed. Captain Dew Weber. The man introduced himself and, without waiting for a reply, waved us toward the buildings. Follow me, he called as the group entered the nearest one. We all obediently followed him into a bulky transport elevator and went down somewhere. Here the captain handed us off to a nondescript man in a neat gray suit and drove off. We stepped out of the elevator and started looking around. Not much to see. A few info screens, a sofa, plants in big pots. Ahem, the man said, demanding attention. I stopped staring at the monitor slowly rotating our planet and fixed my gaze on him. He looked us over carefully and continued. I am one of the official consultants on the project. Later, you'll receive memos with directions to my office. You can come to me with any questions you might have. He paused, studying our faces, apparently expecting questions then and there. But we all remained silent. Now I'll take you to meet the project leader. Follow me. Our quiet, unorganized group walked into a small, cozy conference room and sat down. I noticed everyone tried to keep slightly apart, pairing curator with student. We also sat a bit away from the nearest neighbors. Will you tell me what's going to happen now? I whispered to the curator, glancing around cautiously. No idea, Chris, came the calm reply. This is a classified project, and I'm just a low-level operative helping you develop. Nobody here knows anything except that you're supposed to serve the Commonwealth in the future. His candor, as usual, left me speechless. What else could I ask? Meanwhile, another new person stepped onto a small platform in front of the rows of chairs. This time, an elderly gray-haired man in a black suit that neatly hugged his noticeable paunch. He walked behind the lectern in the center of the platform, pressed a few buttons, causing screens behind him to light up, then fixed us with a serious gaze. Gentlemen, I am glad to welcome you all to the second stage of our project. My name is Dr. Grishek Zal, and I am the direct supervisor of the project in which you've all been involved for over 2 years. Doctor Zal paused, took a sip from a bottle of water, and looked around the room seriously again. 2 years ago, each of you was asked if you wanted to avenge the deaths of your loved ones. You answered affirmatively. Moreover, the same question was posed to 936 children your age, and they all agreed. Unfortunately, the initial tests filtered out a vast number of participants. Some didn't meet the intellectual requirements, others lacked moral strength, and some failed physically. He chewed his lip and took another gulp. Over 2 years, the selection was gradual. Almost every day was a test of wit, determination, and ability to learn. Only 9 of you remain, which is both a lot and a little. 9 is too few. That's bad. But you are the best. And that gives me hope. You could tone down the grandiosity a bit, I whispered to the curator, who just hissed back at me. Now you enter the second phase of the project, and it's time to get acquainted with what we're preparing you for. First, you already know the war is lost by us. It's a disgraceful but almost inevitable fact. The doctor scanned the audience, but no one was going to argue. The situation has long been clear to us. Analysts predict the war will finally end in 5 to 8 years. No sooner than 5, no later than 8. These are good analysts, and I trust them. This means that at most in 8 years, the Commonwealth will cease to exist. We will be gone, and Corona 1 will become an occupied planet. Most likely, our citizens will lose basic rights and freedoms under the new order. Our goal is to give them a chance at a normal life. Zal finished the water and wiped his brow with a tissue. He was nervous. Our project has an initial task, an ultimate goal, and 2 possible paths. The initial task is to create agents of influence within the dictatorship of Corona 3. I suppose you understand what that means. He paused again, but no one asked questions. We all, I think, occasionally pondered that we were being prepared, if not quite as expendables, then at least as dead men walking. Against that backdrop, an agent of influence is almost a pardoned. In the next 5 years, the best instructors of the Commonwealth will train you. You will learn everything you need to accomplish the task. Also, during those 5 years, your cover stories will be developed. You will receive new identities. You will become children of tourists, merchants, diplomats from the dictatorship who happened to be on our planet at the war's outbreak. You will have to use all the knowledge gained here to assimilate into the new society, become its full members, and then carry out the mission assigned to you. How long will that take? Asked a guy sitting a little ahead of us. The doctor sighed heavily, scanned the floor with his eyes, then looked back at us with sorrow. Years. Most likely decades. By the time any of you has an opportunity to do something for your former state, you will probably be very old men that I try to imagine living decades, harboring revenge plans in my head. Not very appealing. It will be hard. The doctor seemed to read my thoughts. But you are the best candidates to handle this. You all remember your home planet. And none of you wants to forget it. In my head, a faint chiming of bells sounded as if by magic. I bit my lip, and the bells reluctantly quieted. What exactly will we have to do? Another colleague dared to ask. The doctor closed his eyes as if gathering his thoughts. Officially, your task is formulated as follows. You must, choosing your own time and place, use the full potential of your current social position to improve the lives of the citizens of the coronary commonwealth. That he opened his eyes, paused, and added, in practice, as I said, this can mean one of 2 approaches: diplomacy and high-level cultural influence, or planetary-scale terror. I chuckled darkly to myself. Dead men, indeed. Doctor Zal went on about our future, but in my head, drowning out his voice, the same question kept spinning. Why not just send It all to hell. My life, it turns out, was already planned to the moment of death. Years of training from dawn to dusk, then a constant life lived in fear of exposure, and finally a suicidal mission with no chance of survival. Was it worth it? Surprisingly, I realized I hadn't taken this seriously until now. They could be preparing us for a landing force, to become officers in planetary defense, or many other things. And we all, well, only I, really fooled ourselves, thinking it would be something heroic. But it looks like we're going to have to kill innocents. The faint chiming returned in my ears, and I shook my head in irritation. The curator, seeming to sense my state, lightly squeezed my elbow and whispered in my ear, "Don't twitch. We'll talk later," and my flare of anger faded. I trusted the curator. Maybe foolishly, given the whole project setup, but still, the doctor kept talking. After our briefing, you'll all have free time to explore the base and your new apartments. Starting the next day, you'll spend a month in the laboratory section. Believe me, you'll come out completely different people. For now, as I said, I suggest you go to your quarters and spend time adapting. Thank you all. Zal gave an awkward bow and quickly left. We slowly headed to the exit, where two men in their standard suits stood holding bundles of packages. "Your kits," one said, scanning our faces, then handed a package to me and one to the curator, motioning us to move. I peeked inside the package. A nice badge shimmering with holograms, a thin booklet, a brand new communicator, and a key card, presumably for my new quarters. "Let's go." The curator waved me on, and we walked away. Finding our apartments took about 10 minutes. We had to go down one level and wander a bit through the corridors. I liked the new place. Cozy, spacious, high-tech. I took off my shoes and checked the second room, the bedroom, the bathroom, then returned to the living room, where the curator sat in a chair, pensively watching me. "How do you like it?" I gestured around. "Come here. Chris, I want you to hear something," he suddenly said and started playing a simple tune on his watch. Somewhat puzzled, I approached his chair and leaned in as he motioned. The curator pulled me closer by my collar and, covering his mouth with his hand, began whispering quickly, "Listen very carefully and just shut up. Not a single question. I want you to throw out all the nonsense from your head right now." "Quiet," I said. "I don't care if you have that nonsense or not. Remember one thing only. From this project, you can only get out feet first. No thoughts or words about standing up, quitting, sabotaging, or anything like that. Right now, you have only one path. Do what you're told, and do it as well as you can. No improvisation. You have to survive these 5 years. Then you'll become a citizen of the dictatorship if you're not a complete fool. And only then will you decide your fate. Got it? Not now. Later. Now you learn. Learn better than anyone else." He paused briefly. I obediently waited, bent double. They're probably listening in on us and recording everything. I'm speaking very quietly, but there's still a chance my voice will be decoded. You won't say a single word to me right now, and you'll never mention this conversation out loud. If anyone asks me about it, I'll say I had a routine talk and advised you not to make a fuss about the assignment, but just to study. I told you now's not the time for foolish, boyish decisions. And that's the truth. If anyone questions you, you can say the same. That will be true." The curator was silent for a moment longer. "That's it. My direct order, no word from you about this conversation. I don't want to know your thoughts on the matter." He released my collar, and I straightened up. For a while, the curator looked into my eyes thoughtfully, then smiled wryly and got up from the chair. "All right. Make yourself at home here. I'm going to see where they put me." He tousled my hair and left the room. I started inspecting my quarters, trying to push his words out of my head. It didn't work well. After checking every corner, I found a new set of uniform, changed into it, and flopped down on the bed, taking a little booklet with me. I didn't understand why the information hadn't been uploaded to my communicator or the local computer. Maybe they thought it would be more convenient in paper form. The booklet contained a base map with detailed descriptions of the compartments, phone numbers to contact various local bigwigs, and the schedule of upcoming events. One line caught me by surprise. Genetic modification of the organism. Because according to the schedule, I was supposed to spend the entire first month on base in the medical center. Curious and a bit frightened, I requested more information from the computer. But the list that appeared held nothing supernatural. The result of the complex modifications was supposed to be very minor changes in my body. I'd see a little better. My reaction time would improve slightly. My pain threshold would increase. Hearing would get better. Coordination would improve. Immunity would strengthen. My weak resistance to poisons would rise, and my resistance to known truth serums would be quite strong. My emotional state would stabilize. I read through the list of procedures and their expected outcomes, slowly opening my mouth in astonishment. Each operation was extremely complicated. The drugs cost a fortune. The equipment was available on the planet only in very limited quantities. Not to mention the doctors capable of performing all this. And in the end, it was a consciously done dud, a placebo. What could have made a man into a Superman was, in my case, supposed to improve the body by just a little, 5 to 10% of what's possible. But that made perfect sense. The threes would be total idiots if they didn't pay attention to a man demonstrating unique abilities. In my case, everything would be quiet and peaceful. I wouldn't see in the infrared spectrum. I wouldn't hear ultrasound or dodge bullets. But I'd be just a little better than a regular person in every way. And I was starting to like that quietly. I went to sleep, thinking about the scale of what was happening around me. If each of us was to get 14 modifications, at current prices, that was probably the annual budget of a small town. And that was only a small part of the whole plan. Thinking about the financial side of the project, I fell asleep. In the morning, I was awakened by a neat knock on the door of my quarters. I had to get up and open it. Outside stood a middle-aged, bald man in a white lab coat over his standard suit. "Good morning, Chris," he smiled at me. "Starting today, I'm your new curator. Get ready. We have to be at the medical block in half an hour. Come on, kid, come on. Use your brain," Professor Romas said dramatically, raising his hands and burning me with a scolding glare. "Sir, Professor, I'm trying. Try harder." In space, no one waits for you to recall all the constants. Astronavigation, a wildly complex subject, a blend of space physics, mathematics, and both geometries. Mind-crushing formulas describing hyperspace jumps, and my poor brain struggling to memorize them somehow. That damn professor, a true fanatic. He had a clear task, to conduct an in-depth preparation for studying the subject. But instead, for 3 months now, we've been cramming the standard academic course at an accelerated pace. According to him, that's safer. He doesn't care that my head splits trying to understand the material. And of all things, I ended up in the technical group. A mathematical mindset, big prospects, bah. The guys in the diplomatic track are now doing some interesting psychological tests and simulating government negotiations, while I'm calculating transport routes from one star system to another. For no apparent reason, since from the beginning of space exploration, computers, not pilots, have done this kind of work. I emerged from the professor's session squeezed like a lemon. Luckily, I had only one class left for today, and it was one of my favorites, Special Hand-to-Hand Combat. It was taught by a grim, wiry sergeant from some military branch unknown to me. In nearly 3 years of classes, he never gave his name, preferring that I address him by rank while calling me Private. Well, if that's easier for him. You're here, Private. Looks like the old man totally fried your brain today. Yes, Sergeant, let's do the warm-up set. Warm-up was good and pleasant. I was used to physical exercises since my first base training. They had hand-to-hand combat too, but it was completely different from what the sergeant taught me. You, Private, need to learn 2 things, he enlightened me on our very first lesson. First, be a killing machine. Second, be a country bumpkin who as a kid spent 2 months at a hand-to-hand course and only learned to wave his arms toward the enemy instead of away. Our training was divided into these 2 modes. First, fighting in the most effective and brutal style, neutralizing the enemy as quickly as possible. Then, being a punching bag, wildly swinging fists and trying to defend yourself, it was quite tough. But I gradually adapted, and the switch in my head was working better and better. Come on, Private. Why are you shrinking like a scared little wimp? And a kick to my shin made me awkwardly jump back, losing balance. The sergeant took advantage and, ignoring my feeble block attempt, landed a mighty punch into my solar plexus, making me curl on the floor, gasping for air. Well done, Private. 10-minute break. The sergeant was clearly pleased. I lasted a whole minute fully enduring the country bumpkin style and took the final hit without showing anything from the Special Forces arsenal. Why all this? My curator explained it clearly before the course began. Our teachers had a grand task to turn each project participant into a perfect agent. This means a lot of knowledge and skills, but also hiding those skills. It's hard to seem like a regular guy if you demonstrate mixed martial arts champion skills in your first fight. So they teach us two styles, one for business and one for curious eyes. This time, the sergeant didn't go wild and taught me nothing new. Just a couple of sparring rounds, then a break. And he seemed thoughtful today. You know, Private, our classes are ending? He suddenly surprised me with a question. No, I answered briefly, still catching my breath. Why? I guess they want a free time for other subjects, he said thoughtfully, sitting on a punching bag lying on the floor. Are you following the news? Generally, yes, but not today yet. The sergeant frowned. Shit's hitting the fan, Private. It crept up quietly, and here it is. 6 hours ago, the Threes shot down one of our orbitals to hell. Lost several ships. Sure, they escaped to space, but the deed is done. There's footage in the planetary network showing it crashing into the ocean near low cost. Quite a sight. There are still 11 left. Could be 30 for all I care, he grimaced. The main thing is, the beginning is made. Do you understand what this means? The destruction of one orbital station means, first, we hardly have any space fleet left to fight the enemy and cover the bases, and second, the enemy has effective weapons and resources to destroy key planetary defense units with minimal losses. Overall, it means the enemy has entered the fourth of 5 war stages. Most likely, the fourth stage will last 2 to 3 years, during which all or most orbital stations will be destroyed. Then the fifth stage begins, implying total external control of the planet and pinpoint orbital strikes, after which the war will be finally lost. The sergeant stared at me in surprise. I shrugged in response. I always forget, Private, that you're not just cannon fodder, my mentor finally smirked. In my case, that means they'll cram even more knowledge into me, I sighed. I'm afraid I'll die before the training ends. Don't you dare, the sergeant said, suddenly serious. You live in a bubble here and don't really know what's happening outside. I assure you, the infocanal pictures have nothing to do with reality. The civilian population is in panic. Everyone understands the shitstorm coming, but they can't do anything. The military situation is even worse. We're just preparing to die soon. All of us, without exception. And, you know, it doesn't really boost morale. Apparently, something showed on my face because he chuckled knowingly. You think, what's that got to do with you? It means, Private, that when they zap me from orbit with plasma, in my last moments I'll be thinking about some kid I once trained who'll survive this hell, get out on top, and years later avenge not only his family on the second planet, but also one nasty, long-dead soldier. And, Private, believe me, I'll die with a smile on my lips. A lump formed in my throat, and I had nothing to say. The sergeant didn't expect a reply anyway. Jumping to his feet easily, he waved at me. Goodbye, Private. Study like hell, and someday drink a glass for me. Then he walked calmly across the hall and left, closing the door carefully, leaving me alone. For some time, I sat on the floor, sorting out my thoughts. The sergeant had just, with one careless boot kick, knocked the ground out from under me. Before, I took all this training. More personally, something concerning only me. Well, maybe my parents, too. But now, with almost 100% certainty, the enemy will destroy everyone connected to the military and government structures. With 70 to 80% probability, the scientific and cultural elite will also be wiped out. There's no point in leaving. The best minds alive. Who knows what they might come up with? So it turns out, the ones training me in all these disciplines are practically doomed men. People who will die when the enemy comes. And now they're all going out of their way to cram knowledge into my head, not because they want to make some money, but because they want revenge on my behalf. They're forging weapons. Both Dr. Zoll, who's been worn down badly over the past 3 years, and Sargent, and even the eccentric Professor Romus, drilling astronavigation into me, that I felt ashamed. Ashamed of my occasional laziness, the urge to quit everything and leave the project, and the anger I'd felt toward my teachers. Thanks, Sergeant, I whispered to myself, stood up, and left the room. My good mood only started creeping back during lunch. They say chewing food releases some kind of antidepressants, and maybe it's true that I went home already in a decent state of mind, and my mood improved along the way. I glanced at the clock, almost 4 o'clock. Miranda was probably already at my place. Her schedule was different, shorter, that we met 6 months ago in a general psychology course. Turns out, the base wasn't just hosting our project, the girls had something similar. She was the first to talk to me. She said she liked my eyes then, gray with a faint blue tint, like the autumn sky. Well, I liked her all at once, from her slender legs and white pants to her laughing brown eyes and long black hair, tousled over her shoulders. First, we just chatted when we saw each other in psychology classes. Then we started meeting in the cafeteria, in the lounges, in the greenhouse. 2 weeks later, I realized I'd fallen in love, completely and irrevocably. Her laughter, her smile, her hair. Our first kiss, one evening on a bench in the greenhouse, totally threw me off balance and drowned me in feelings. Then, suddenly, we began spending our free hours in my compartment. Yeah, I just turned 15 and Miranda was 16. In the big world, people would probably judge us, but the residents of the center didn't care what we did in our free time. We took full advantage, shedding tension after training and mind-boggling study. I approached my door, heart pounding as usual. Was she there or not? The card, the duplicate I'd had to make for Miranda, took 2 tries in the reader's slot, and then signaled the door was open. Sweetheart, is that you? Came from the far room, and I smiled foolishly. It's me. I'll be right there. As usual, she was lying on my bed, half dressed, but up, reading something on her tablet. Seeing me in the doorway, she smiled slyly, fluttered her long lashes, and put the tablet aside, sitting up on the bed. You're so beautiful, I blurted out. I know, she answered playfully and stretched her whole body, making me shiver. Slightly. Where the pistol came from, I never understood. Suddenly, I found myself staring straight down the barrel of a standard police Folk 16 held in a fragile girl's hand. The next moment, there was a flash, and it felt like I'd been hit with a sledgehammer. The walls and ceiling spun around me, then back. I felt myself sitting on the floor again, leaning against the door frame. A red stain was spreading quickly over my uniform on the chest. For a while, I just stared at it, at the hole in the fabric made by the bullet, at how my blood was soaking into the gray pants. Then I struggled to lift my head. Miranda, with her legs crossed and leaning slightly forward, was sitting on the edge of the bed, curiously watching me. Why? I tried to ask, but blood bubbled on my lips, turning the question into a bloody cough. The pain, held back by a sudden adrenaline rush, began to return. What? Goat? Didn't expect that, she giggled, getting up from the bed. My curator came out of the bathroom. What was he doing here? My vision blurred, and I focused all my strength on still seeing what was happening. Did I pass the test? Miranda asked the curator, smiling and handing him the pistol. If you leave him like this, he'll die in half an hour max. Yes, well done, the curator smiled. He twirled the pistol in his hands, then raised it and shot the cheerfully grinning girl right in the face that Miranda's head was thrown back. The bedroom wall splattered with red. Her body stood for a second, then collapsed on her back. The curator glanced at me. I responded with a dull, glassy stare. My mind was fogging. I no longer tried to understand anything. "Don't worry, Chris, we'll patch you up now," he smiled, and I heard the entrance door opening behind me. Then darkness that I came to suddenly, like an alarm siren. Opened my eyes and stared at the ceiling, at the bright lamps. Almost immediately I shut my eyes and turned away from the light. "Good, Chris, you're awake," the curator's voice sounded. "Quick, tell me what happened, and give an analysis." I opened my eyes again and looked at him. Then I scanned the room. We were in a standard medical ward. I was lying on a bed, bandaged and covered with 4 needles. The curator, wearing a white coat, sat nearby. His bald head shone brightly under the hospital lights. "Come on, Chris, debrief me." I came home. Miranda was there. "She tried to kill me on your orders. She shot me. You killed her. Give me a drink." The curator handed me a glass with a straw, and I greedily drank the life-giving liquid for a while. Then I leaned back on the pillows and closed my eyes. "Now the analysis, Chris." I don't know. The image of Miranda's smile as she pulled the trigger lingered in my mind. Think. I don't want to think. My mind, seemingly drugged by medicine, drifted and refused any mental work. The image of Miranda with the gun was replaced by that of the curator shooting Miranda. The only thing I was sure of was that something in my life had changed drastically. The debriefing only happened 3 days later, once the medics had patched me up enough to let me walk on my own. "So, read this." The curator slid a thin folder toward me. Inside were just a few sheets. Katie Tisho, operational code name, Miranda Shaw. Photo. Dossier.my. Miranda was 18, not 16. Her real hair color was platinum. She never participated in any program similar to mine, but she graduated from the Metropolitan Intelligence Academy. And she was a lesbian. I flipped through the thin dossier silently for a while. If you don't believe me, I have authority to give you the full dossier with video materials. The curator finally said in a neutral tone. I shook my head, closed the folder, and handed it back. "So what do you think?" The curator tucked the dossier into his briefcase and leaned back in his chair. Thinking was disgusting. Talking was even worse, because I'd already figured out the truth in those 3 days, and that truth made me look like an idiot. She had an assignment, I muttered hollowly. To start a relationship with me, keep it going for a long time, and never reveal herself. Though the legend was totally alien to her. The curator nodded approvingly. During the mission, she never gave away anything but the legend, but learned a lot of information from you. That's true. That's exactly why you killed her. That's right. Silence fell for a while. I remembered the sweet moments with Miranda, but the memories kept being interrupted by the image of the gun barrel. And somewhere on the edge of my consciousness floated the thought that my first love was a lesbian, and judging by the dossier, a pretty uncompromising one. Which meant anyone could enjoy sex in bed, but not her. I clenched my teeth, remembering how proud I'd been that such a girl loved me and how good she'd felt with me. Feeling like a self-absorbed little idiot who was easily fooled by some girl was painful. It was timely to remember how the shot blew her brains out onto the bedroom wall, and I looked at the curator with a faint tint of gratitude. "So, Chris," he broke the silence, "consider that you just completed one of the special courses. Throughout human history, there have been countless female spies and countless spies who failed because of women. The project as a whole, and I in particular, apologize for this course, but it couldn't have been otherwise. We simply didn't have time for you to learn things the hard way. Congratulations, you've become a man. You've gained experience in love and deception, and a bullet to the chest." Katie was an excellent shooter. She had clear instructions, exactly where to shoot, so the whole situation was completely under control. I turned away and stared at the wall. "By the way, you have a week of vacation. During that week, you'll have only 2 mandatory sessions per day with a psychologist and, with a female support group, let's say. What kind of support group? You're an adult now. You'll figure it out yourself. Consider it another kind of psychological relief after this course. I told the psychologist a lot. I spoke about what I thought of the project, the curator, Miranda in particular, and women in general. The gray-haired, bespectacled old man, twisting a pen, barely spoke, only occasionally asking short leading questions that opened new floodgates in my mind. Psychologists really are remarkable people. By the second session, after venting everything, I noticeably calmed down. The resentment and bitterness loosened a bit, and the old man and I had a good heart-to-heart talk. Actually, the last time I spoke so openly was with the old curator. The new one wasn't bad either, but I just never got used to him. But I really didn't want to go to the support group at all. Still, I had to, and in the end, I never once regretted it. I don't know where the project folks recruited their staff, but the girls easily outshone the models and actresses you sometimes see on TV. I think if it weren't for the story with Miranda Katie, I would have hopelessly and utterly fallen in love with the first one I spent the night with. But now, the image of Miranda pressing the trigger kept flashing in front of my eyes, completely killing any romantic feelings. So I dutifully spent the time, rapidly expanding my sexual experience, then just signed off on the forms with the girls and forgot about them. Not always immediately, but I forgot. God knows, maybe this whole scheme was supposed to make me stop falling for every woman I met, to keep my head cool, and take casual sex more lightly. In the end, that's pretty much how it worked out, much to the project leader's delight. I returned from vacation healed, calmer, and ready for new lessons. And those lessons started without delay. So, young man, what have you driven in your life so far? Asked my new instructor. I had to admit, nothing. That's bad, but nothing can be done, philosophized Captain Zoltan Schmerge, who was assigned to teach me vehicle control. We'll have to start from scratch. We won't make a top ace out of you, but you won't need to be embarrassed. He started teaching me everything immediately. I don't know if it was a special method, a shortage of time, or just a whim of the captain, but I had to fly a flyer on the very first day of classes. As far as I know, documents will be registered under your name in the network, licenses for ground vehicles, and light civilian flyers. I'll teach you to fly all types, but you understand, secrecy. From the inside, the flyer's cockpit looked like a cramped capsule covered with lots of sensors, switches, and screens. Seeing the expression on my face as I examined this abundance, the captain frowned and dragged me to the next vehicle in the hangar. I think we'll start simple. The new flyer differed from the previous one about as much as a bicycle differs from a racing car. A joystick, a small display showing a few parameters. That's IT to AT, my silent question, the captain explained. This is the cheapest civilian model. Speed up to 200 kilometers per hour. Ceiling only 500 meters. You won't fly it at night. You won't see anything around. And that one. I turned toward the first flyer. Oh, Schmerge smiled broadly. That's a special military model. Speed up to 2,000, suborbital flight capability, underwater use, camouflage, scanning in all ranges, adaptive glass, armor, armament. It was obvious he was ready to sell his soul for such a machine. Maybe we should start with that one? I'll try to figure it out. No. He shook his head regretfully. Better learn to stand on your feet first, then we'll run. Flying the flyer turned out to be a piece of cake. You press the start button, then just move the joystick, and the machine gently lifts off the ground, gains altitude, and turns. Different directions. Pedals control acceleration and braking. The screen in front of you shows altitude, speed, fuel reserve, and a map of the area. Simple as a boot. Made so even an idiot could understand. The captain, sitting in the adjacent seat, hardly monitored the process, rightly assuming I wasn't an idiot and would figure it out myself. He just gave tasks. Fly around the valley a couple of times. Make 10 takeoffs and landings. Land on the lake. I even regretted that training hadn't started earlier. Even a 10-year-old could handle a flyer. That first lesson was probably the happiest I'd had in years. To pilot a machine gliding Through the air, watching the earth rushing by below. What could be better? And the best part came after we got out of the cockpit. Well, overall, I have no complaints about you, which means I'm issuing you a permit for this category of transport. I won't fly with you on this bird anymore, but from now on it's yours, and you can practice piloting on your own. If you want, of course. I definitely will. That's great. Meanwhile, we'll start figuring out more complicated models. As I stomped from the flyer hangar toward the house, a message came through on my communicator from the curator, ordering me to arrive at his office for a meeting in half an hour. A little puzzled, I quickened my pace. The curator usually hung around nearby, dropped in unannounced, but almost never set appointments. Why now? Have a seat. He greeted me when I looked in the office that I climbed into a cozy chair, ready to hear the news. You're already aware the war has basically entered its penultimate phase, he said grimly, pressing some buttons on a touchscreen. Accordingly, our project is also slowly entering its final stage. How long it will last, no one knows. Maybe a couple of years. Of course, we'd like to teach you as much as possible, but many things will have to be sacrificed for the greater good. A screen on the wall lit up with a photo of a family. A man, a woman, and a child. The adults smiled with perfect white teeth. The boy, about 12 years old, looked serious. Meet them. The curator nodded toward the screen. This is you and your family. Well, after 5 years in the project, it's hard to surprise me, but this still felt a bit unexpected. Amelia. And Jerry Alt Christopher Alt. The boy in the photo really resembled me somehow. The same eye shape, the same face shape, and the features were quite close. Noticing me staring, the curator nodded approvingly. Believe me, a colossal effort was made. There weren't that many citizens from the third planet at the start of the war, but suitable covers were found for almost all of you. You'll have nearly perfect protection and a legend. And what about those they couldn't find covers for? They left the project, Chris. Didn't you notice there are only 6 of you left? We can't take risks leaving imperfect pieces. In the project, I didn't ask what happened to the expelled. Less you know, the better you sleep. I think that wise principle is adopted by everyone who has reached this stage of the project. As for your legend, these people, he nodded, at the photo, have been relocated to a government apartment for 2.5 years now, under strict house arrest. The official line is that they're being monitored as citizens of a hostile state. And that's exactly how it is. Surveillance is maintained over all third planeters. Only in this case, it's especially tight. Just recently, Captain Schmerge told me that I'd be registered with driving licenses for some vehicle categories. How, then, could this Chris have gotten them under such close watch? The curator looked extremely pleased, like a cat who'd just seen a jar of sour cream. Don't take us for fools, kid. The official position of our government is that children shouldn't suffer. So your double goes to a special school every day under guard, where he actually manages just fine. He's no star student, never studied astronavigation, but he will definitely get his licenses for civilian flyers and light vehicles in the near future. Everything's under control. Got it. Since that's clear, here's what you have ahead of you. From now until the end of your training, you'll have 2 mandatory sessions. 2 hours in the evening. Before bed, you study your new biography. Watch videos, read reports, go through dossiers. And in the mornings, we'll have a talk. Just casual chat about your life. I think in a couple of years, you'll know everything by heart. He disappeared behind the desk, rummaging through some drawer. Then popped back up and slapped a pile of stuff in front of me. This is the general electronic dossier, he waved. The silver drive in front of my nose. You can just read it on screen if you want. This is the main dossier you'll need to memorize. A hefty folder. You'll put all this up in your room. Photo of your parents, diploma for 3rd place in school running competitions, other nonsense. The curator was silent for a while, probably debating whether to hand me something else, but decided, that's enough. That's it for now. Take it and start studying from today. Tomorrow we'll talk about your family. Back in my compartment, I stared at the group photo for a long time before placing it on the shelf beside my bed. They're smiling, probably suspecting nothing right now. maybe even making plans, hoping the war will end soon and they can live normal lives again. Meanwhile, somewhere on the other side of the planet, I'm sitting here, looking at this photo and fully aware of what awaits them. No intelligence agency would allow prototypes, the originals their agents were copied from, to remain alive and have a chance to expose their copies. Darkness. And the worst part is, these thoughts don't even stir much emotion anymore. Probably after Miranda. Whatever, just 3 more sacrifices. I sighed and finally put the photo on the table, turning it so the lamp illuminated the faces of my new family better. The flyer landed gently in the courtyard of some gloomy gray building. Being the only passenger, I descended the ramp onto the concrete, stepped aside, and looked around. An enclosed inner space, marked with various crooked lines. Around me were walls peppered with dark window voids. Not a soul in sight. In the approaching dusk, the whole scene felt quite unsettling. The flyer stirred my hair with a gust of air before rising back into the sky. I sighed heavily and headed toward a door illuminated by a couple of modest lamps. No one met me as I crossed the courtyard diagonally. Behind the door, there was no one either, just a corridor stretching inward. I moved forward toward the faint voices coming from somewhere inside. The room I was looking for was the third door on the left. I knocked twice, waited for permission to enter, and opened the door. Inside, a small, sparsely furnished room, a TV was on, and 2 men in police uniforms were talking. Strangers. The senior officer, wearing captain's insignia, glanced at me. With a blank expression, nodded, gestured to a chair in the corner, then turned back to his colleague. Without a word, I sat down and prepared to wait. On the news, a clip was playing showing the remains of an orbital station falling in a suburb of the capital. At first, as I knew, the government tried to suppress the video, but then they just gave up. It's very hard to hide what millions of people saw. Out a fiery, crumbling behemoth the size of a small mountain was descending from the sky with apparent slowness. The cameraman's hands trembled a little, and every now and then swearing could be heard. But the picture was clear. 1 kilometer to the ground, 500 meters, 100. Touchdown. Flames and dust clouds shot upward, houses hit by. The shockwaves scattered like splinters. The cameraman screamed another curse, and then the shockwave reached him. The footage tumbled, stopping a few seconds later on a shot of the sky. The video ended. Those bastards. One of the policemen muttered with hatred, staring at the screen. I remained silent, unsure how much they knew about me. If they believed I was Christopher Alt, it would be foolish to show solidarity or even engage in conversation. Footsteps echoed in the corridor, and another policeman entered the room. He glanced briefly at his colleagues, turned to me, and shook his head, signaling for me to follow him out. I nearly gasped in surprise. Standing before me in police uniform was the very sergeant who had taught me hand-to-hand combat several years ago. Yet he gave no sign of recognizing me. So I held back and silently followed him. We walked through dimly lit corridors in silence for some time. Then he finally spoke. "Good to see you, Private." "You too, Sergeant." "You know what's next? Remember the legend? After our space forces shot down the orbital station, which ultimately fell near New Venice, societal tension hit a breaking point. Some gang attacked our apartment. They knocked out the guards and brutally killed my parents." My voice trembled slightly. An acting coach would have been pleased. I was at school. Due to the emergency, I was detained until tomorrow morning. Police are working in the apartment now. Tomorrow they'll clean it up and send me back. They say the culprits have already been identified from video surveillance and will be arrested soon. Good. The sergeant nodded approvingly. You'll get a packet of documents for your new identity. In the morning, I'll accompany you to the apartment. You'll be under 24-hour surveillance and house arrest. Understand, it's for your own safety. The trial should be in about a week. Ready for your new life?" "Ready." "Uh-huh." He didn't quite believe me, but said no more. In the room where we arrived, my new things were laid out. A simple gray suit, a bag with underwear, a few shirts, shoes. The police department confiscated all your belongings for examination. Analogs were bought for you. And thank goodness, I wouldn't have to wear someone else's underwear. Besides clothes, a wallet, and a communicator lay on the table. I knew exactly what was in the communicator, the same model remained in my apartment at the project base. But the documents. I took the wallet and pulled out its contents. A universal pilot driver's license. The first categories open for land and air transport. Not much to ANID card. That's me looking back. The photo was taken a year ago, as were the fingerprints. Christopher Alt, 18 years old. In the citizenship field, bright red shimmering letters spelled Corona 3. On regular IDs, calm blue font notes the owner is a subject of the Crown Commonwealth. But here there was a clear mark, so everyone would instantly know who stands before them. A Commonwealth payment card. I suspected it was empty, but it was included. Among the necessary documents, that was it. I folded the papers back into the wallet and changed into the suit. It fit well enough. The cut was obviously cheap, but where would a family living on a meager government stipend for years find expensive clothes? Now wait, the sergeant instructed. You can sleep on the couch. The suit will get a bit wrinkled. And I was left alone. Waiting is the most tedious part in any situation. I paced the room, re-examined the documents, checked my new communicator. But my thoughts kept returning to tomorrow. My training was finally over. I would no longer see my bald curator, nor the erratic professor who had managed to teach me the basics of astronavigation. No one from the base, which had been my home for a long 6 years. A chill ran down my spine. Most of my conscious life had been spent preparing for this moment, but it still caught me off guard. Under the project roof, I had felt chosen, provided, with every opportunity for the best development. Now, like a fledgling barely learning to fly, I was being pushed into real life. And judging by how my debut into the world was arranged, my path ahead would definitely not be strewn with roses. Settling on the couch, I stared at a crack in the ceiling. I wondered if the other guys had gone off to their legends today as well. Probably not. Why rush and do everything at once? There was still time, plenty enough to sort everything out over a couple of months. After all, 2 orbital fortresses still hovered above the planet. They were useless, really, but invasion wouldn't start until they crashed down like flaming meteors, just like the others. Over the past 3 years, our enemies had acted with relentless cruelty, cutting off all resistance opportunities for the Commonwealth. One by one, defensive stations were knocked out of orbit. Sometimes months passed between attacks. Sometimes only a couple of weeks. After the 7th of 12 fortresses was destroyed, 2 cruisers appeared over the planet, and, within the hour needed to regroup our remaining forces, scorched the spaceport, shipyards, and several military units with precision strikes. Then they calmly retreated into space, leaving us to lick our wounds. After that, even theoretical chances of victory disappeared. Just then, an Earth Federation battleship appeared in our system. It orbited the planet, gathering intelligence and disdainfully ignoring the Commonwealth's attempts to establish contact, then drifted off somewhere between the orbits of Corona 1 and Corona 2. A sort of unobtrusive monitoring of the situation in a minor local conflict at the edge of settled space that I remember the press erupted in fury against the Federation's distancing from our war. Meanwhile, at our base, angry speeches from the media provoked only sad smiles.